Good evening. It's time to go live and talk a little bit about something that's on my mind. It could be for my Wonder Women out there or just for anybody in general who wants to talk about something called the pivot. So what is a pivot? A pivot is changing direction, basically. It's very simple. We just, in sports, it could be in basketball, you pivot and you move and you go a different direction. Sometimes in life, we pivot. And it's not always easy to pivot, but we can accomplish it. And I just kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the pivots that have occurred in my life and how those have come about and maybe how I've handled them in my life. One of the big pivot I had is in 2006, I bought a business in Virginia where we were living and operated that business for 9 years through that whole 2008 and it was tough, and we went through a lot of sacrifice to operate that business, run that business. My family was heavily involved. And as we got to 2015, it was time to close the business. And that was a huge pivot because that's where we had been for years. And a lot of the kids had pretty much kind of grown up in that business, and it was tough to just shut the doors. But we did it, and it was a good pivot in life because it was really draining. Owning a business isn't always what it's cracked up to be. Particularly a retail business can be really draining, very stressful. Loved my time there, loved learning, but when it was time to pivot, I needed to pivot, and so I did. I had other businesses at the time, so I could stay in business in my other ones, but close the doors on that one. And that was a little difficult, but it was a pivot that I needed to do. Another pivot that many people go through, and it's not always the most fun to talk about, but I got a divorce. 33 years I'd been married, and divorce. That was a huge pivot, and not an easy one, of course. And it was going a different direction than I had seen my life, right? We tie ourselves in, and of course we're supposed to. We're partners. We love each other. We're married, and in that relationship, I had children together, and it was a difficult time. That was a really, really tough pivot in my life. Another time that I had to pivot was actually moving. Moving to Utah was a big pivot for me. I remember. I came out to visit, and I was flying back to Virginia, just my sweet self, thinking I'm going back home, da-da-da-da-da. And I'm kind of a faithful person, and all of a sudden in my brain just went, it's time to move to Utah. And I was like, what? Because I still had businesses back there. I had a life. I had bought a house. I had my two younger girls, and they were in school, and it was just clear as a bell. It was time to pivot, and that was a tough one too because I was a business owner, and you don't just give your 2 weeks notice and walk out and go get a different job. In fact, I didn't even know what I was going to do coming to Utah, so that was quite a big pivot for me. And obviously I've survived and I have thrived, but it was a bit of a pivot for sure. And then one other pivot that was obviously a big one in my life was actually getting married again. That's another pivot that I needed to make because now, once again, you've got a partner. It's not just you. It's not just your children, and you're learning a new path in life. So while pivoting can seem challenging and uprooting at times, it can also be very good. The pivots that I've seen in my life have taken me down a road of growth, a road of happiness and joy. Some of them, even if it took me through the mud and the muck and the mire at the first part of the pivot, I still was able to pivot and find a better path for me. So why would I talk about pivoting? So many times in life, we maybe at times we feel stuck, or maybe we're not sure, or maybe we don't like where we are. And sometimes it's a pivot that we need to make, even if it's just a pivot in our thinking. I remember when I turned 30, my thinking changed. I don't know what it was. I don't know if anybody else had that experience at age 30, but when I reached 30, I thought, oh my goodness, I could be 60, which I'm almost 60 now. crazy to think about. But my thought processes changed. It was really strange. And I remember very distinctly that it changed. And so pivots can be good. They don't always have to be bad. And hopefully we're going down a path that takes us. But also the idea is to recognize, do I need to pivot? Is there something in my life where that direction is taking me that isn't a good direction for me? Or it's just not really what's bringing me what I want in my life. And whether that's a job, a relationship, whatever, we evaluate those things and kind of go through them. Now, I'm not talking about, there's difference between obstacles and warning signs. So when I was still single and I was dating, to me, a warning sign, being my age, was a man who maybe didn't have a job, didn't have a career, didn't have a home, maybe was living as a roommate with friends or whatever. To me, that was a warning sign, because a warning sign of, I wanted a partner. I wanted somebody we were going to be kind of equal in that relationship, and I didn't want a project. I'm trying to be nice, but I didn't want that. And I don't think anybody really does, but I didn't want that in my life. So for me, those little things, those were warning signs. But sometimes we just have obstacles. And the obstacles are things we have to work through. When I was making the pivot to come to Utah and make that move, there were a lot of obstacles to come through. I mean, first off, I had to decide, what am I going to do with my life when I grow up? What am I going to do? How am I going to support my family, a job? And I still had property back east. I mean, there were so many obstacles, but I knew that pivot was right for me. So we need to pay attention that sometimes it's warning signs, and we just kind of have to know, is that a warning sign? Or is this simply an obstacle? And an obstacle simply needs to be figured out how to go through, around, above, below, whatever, in order to get to the destination that we want. So this is just a little short video I wanted to have tonight, just kind of talk about pivoting, because sometimes in our lives we need to make that pivot. And it's not always us making that decision, right? Because sometimes circumstances cause us to pivot. Take health, for instance. We go along when we're young thinking, oh my goodness, I'm just got energy, blah, 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 blah. And as we get older and things kind of start occurring, particularly if we haven't been as astute at being healthy or taking care of our bodies, sometimes health challenges can make us pivot. And we do that. And there's obstacles there too, but those obstacles can be pushed through, or you can change your lifestyle. There's a lot of things that you can do in that arena. So drop a P in the comment for pivot if you've ever had to pivot in your life, and feel free to share anything that you have learned in being able to pivot, any little tip discovered along the way. There we go. Sorry. Hope you have a great night. I hope that you learned something tonight and it brought value to you. We will talk to you later. Ciao.